Guys, it's time for another horror movie. Today we're covering the Argentine horror film Aterrados. Every night the man checks under his bed before sleeping, because whenever he falls asleep, some invisible force always moves his bed outward. Once, twice, it seemed okay, but the thing beneath the bed kept making noises relentlessly. Despite being awake for a full day and night, sleep was impossible. Sheer terror jolted him upright instantly. He quickly glanced under the bed, finding nothing in the pitch darkness, but as he raised his head, an emaciated figure appeared right there in the room. Rubbing his weary eyes, the man tried to sleep again, but soon after, the lamp behind him suddenly went dark. Feeling along the power cord, he discovered the plug had been pulled out, so he quickly turned and bent down to reconnect it. But the entity deliberately made noises again, causing the man to catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye. This time he was certain someone had indeed been at the door moments before. So, his mind blank with panic, he chose to bury his head under the blanket like the proverbial ostrich, clasping his hands in desperate prayer. But the malevolent entity wasn't ready to consume him yet. It merely reached out and stroked his head through the blanket. The next morning, the man awoke to find his home completely ransacked, his bed dragged all the way to the front door of the living room. The man's name was Walter, just an ordinary office worker. Despite enduring all this horror, he had no means to move away. Fortunately, their area had seen many supernatural events, and experts skilled in these matters had set up a platform to help the afflicted. Being newly established, it wasn't fully operational yet. Walter called for several days, but the assistant demanded video proof, stating the expert wouldn't cross half the country for trivial matters. Left with no choice, Walter bought a video camera, but just as he arrived home, he found himself staring blankly at the house again, until his neighbor Juan suddenly called out to him. They weren't close, but constant thudding sounds had been coming from Walter's house for days, relentless knocking against the walls, even causing cracks to appear in Juan's home. Walter apologized, lying that they were doing renovations inside. Maintaining neighborly relations, Juan didn't demand compensation, only issuing a warning. That night, Walter sets up the camera in front of his bed. He was utterly terrified, yet simultaneously morbidly eager for the entity's appearance. Torn between fear and curiosity, Walter falls asleep. He's just too exhausted. Soon a heavy thud woke him. The camera by his bed had been knocked to the floor. Looking towards where the camera fell, Walter also saw the shadow of a mysterious figure on the wall, horrifying, its hands trembling incessantly. Walter frantically turned on the light and grabbed the camera. This time he had captured evidence, but the sight also made his hair stand on end. The creature stared at Walter for a long moment before swiftly retreating into a wardrobe. The loud thud of the wardrobe door closing turned out to be exactly what knocked the camcorder to the floor. Now Walter stared at the wardrobe, holding his breath. Unarmed, he wouldn't dare open it recklessly, so he retrieved a revolver from a drawer outside the room. Opening the wardrobe, he still saw no sign of the ghostly figure. Not finding it only heightened Walter's anxiety. He checked the camera footage again and saw the thing had actually crawled out from under his bed. Recalling all he'd endured, Walter was completely shattered inside. Just then, the wardrobe behind him creaked open once more. The creature hadn't gone anywhere. It had been inside the whole time, now slowly advancing towards Walter. Walter sees it in the reflection on the gun's surface. The next day, a young boy kicked his soccer ball into Walter's yard. Retrieving it, the boy paused to drink from the outside faucet, but immediately loud banging erupted from inside the house. The usually mild-mannered Walter suddenly became intensely aggressive, harshly warning the boy not to touch his things and to get out of his yard. The terrified boy stumbled backward, unwittingly stepping into the middle of the road. He was hit by a bus. All the neighbors rushed over. Even Juan, who had been painting indoors, hurried out upon hearing the commotion. Seeing the scene outside, Juan anxiously called out his wife's name. The boy was the child of Alicia, their neighbor across the street. Juan's wife had been good friends with Alicia, so the couple attended the funeral. Not long after the boy was buried, strange events began again. The boy silently returned home. Finding her son seated at the dinner table, Alicia was overwhelmed and distraught. She prepared him a meal, then called her ex-boyfriend, Funes. Funes was now the police chief responsible for the area. Recently diagnosed with heart disease, he was due to retire in just 1 year. To conduct a more thorough investigation, Funes called in a supernatural investigator and former coroner named Jano. He told Jano that before his arrival, they had seen the boy move slightly, leaving Jano skeptical yet curious as he leaned in closer. The overwhelming smell of decay filling the entire house made him naturally doubtful, until Jano noticed the boy's muddy, broken fingers. He deduced that the boy must have spent days digging through the soil to claw his way out of the grave. Another possibility was that grieving relatives, unable to accept his death, had exhumed him themselves. Jano had investigated many cases of desecrated graves before, citing numerous instances where heartbroken families dug up their departed loved ones. But regardless of the cause, they needed to rebury the boy quickly to prevent unnecessary rumors. Just as they were discussing this, the glass of milk in front of the boy was suddenly knocked over, as if he was throwing a tantrum. Early the next morning, as officers prepared to remove the body, Alicia fiercely resisted. She insisted her son had returned home because he missed her, claiming he was still alive. Fearing Alicia might be declared mentally unstable and institutionalized, Funes secretly injected her with a sedative to put her to sleep. To avoid drawing attention, Funes went ahead to the cemetery to dig the grave, while Jano placed the boy's body in a crate, waiting for Funes to transport it. While Jano was scanning the area outside, he saw an old acquaintance named Mora. Mora was the expert Walter had contacted earlier, and she had traveled across Argentina to investigate Walter's case, though Walter himself seemed to have vanished. Learning of the supernatural case at Jano's location, they both headed to Alicia's house across the street. Looking at the resurrected boy, Mora and Jano discussed the details of the case and began to suspect a connection between Walter's case and the dead child. Meanwhile, a young boy named Patricio climbed into Alicia's backyard chasing his soccer ball and stumbled upon his deceased friend sitting at the dining table. Confused, Patricio tapped on the window, thinking his friend was alive, and the corpse abruptly twisted its neck to stare back. Jano rushed toward the noise and found Patricio's abandoned backpack, realizing the body had been discovered. He quickly moved to stuff the body into a freezer, just as Funes returned from the cemetery ready to transport it. As they prepared to move the freezer together, Funes claimed he heard crying inside and crouched down to listen. After that incident, Walter's neighbor Juan also started experiencing supernatural events at home. His wife Clara first heard garbled voices from the drain while cooking. One phrase stood out clearly: "Kill him." When Juan returned from work, Clara told him about the drain voices. Juan was stunned but recalled his recent encounter with Walter, suggesting it might be due to the neighbor's renovations and would soon pass. Later that night, Clara suddenly got up and went to the bathroom. Soon after, heavy thudding sounds against the wall kept Juan awake. He rushed to Walter's door in just his underwear. He rang the bell. Though someone answered, no one spoke, and strange noises continued inside. Frustrated, Juan shouted insults and returned home. But upon entering his room, he realized the banging came from his own bathroom. Remembering his wife, Juan flung the door open to a horrific sight. Clara floated midair, slamming against the wall in a grotesque, contorted pose. Juan grabbed her but couldn't restrain her body, helplessly watching as she became covered in blood. Notably, water kept flowing from the shower head throughout the ordeal. The scene cut to Juan being taken to the police station as the prime suspect, but the three paranormal investigators fully believed his preposterous account. Rosenstock cited a similar 1988 U.S. case involving a victim like Juan's wife. They needed access to Juan's house for investigation. Noting his neighbor had already consented, only Juan's signature remained. After Juan signed the agreement, they entered 3 separate houses carrying professional gear. Jano investigated Alicia's home. Mora examined Juan's house, while Rosenstock and Funes jointly searched Walter's residence. Though well-equipped, they were theorists better suited to gathering data. Confronting an unknown entity required understanding it first to devise countermeasures. Soon, Funes and Rosenstock discovered strange symbols in Walter's bathroom. Funes, visibly frightened, lit a cigarette, his heart condition worsening the tension. Then something bizarre happened again. Rosenstock discovered the tableware clinging to the underside of a cabinet. He reaches out to feel around, and suddenly a small knife plunges straight into his palm. After struggling for a while, unable to pull it out, Rosenstock realizes that thing is actually sucking his blood. Sensing someone inside the cabinet, Funes quickly drew his pistol, but the moment the door swung open, the creature darted away in a flash. Rosenstock pulled out the knife and bandaged his hand roughly. Meanwhile, Funes urgently called Jano, saying his heart couldn't take much more and he might need to retreat. Jano naturally knew about his condition, but halfway through their talk, Jano asked Funes exactly where he was in the house. Because they were facing each other across the street, Jano said he thought he saw a man standing by the window, visible only through the glass. But Funes insisted he wasn't near the window, and Rosenstock was still inside bandaging his hand. Suddenly, a scream rings out, and all contact with Jano is lost. Now, Funes just wants to leave with Jano, but when he tries to say goodbye to Rosentak, he's stopped. Rosentak said he'd discovered an incredibly rare phenomenon and invited Funes to the bedside to see. He lifted Walter's bedsheet, asking if it looked empty from that angle. So he walked directly to the foot of the bed and flipped the sheet upward. Funes, already struggling with his heart condition, was so terrified he slammed the door and fled Walter's house in panic. He rushed across the street to Alicia's house searching for Jano, but Jano had vanished. Only shattered glass littered the floor. Nearby, a liquor cabinet caught his eye. A bloody handprint stained its surface, and faint sounds came from within, yet opening it revealed only dishes. Then Funes remembered Rosentak's words. Everything has two sides. You have to look at it from a different perspective. Funes lifted the side panel of the cabinet door and finally found Jano trapped inside. But Jano's complexion was horribly off, like a corpse dead for days, his eyes shredded by glass shards. At the same time, Mora made a major discovery. She found Walter hiding deep within a crack in Juan's wall. Funes ran to Mora, frantic, saying Jano was in serious trouble. However, Mora calmly told Funes to wash his hands first, explaining these entities were drawn to blood. Based on her research, she'd also concluded the creatures likely came from an interdimensional space, capable of spreading something through water. When people made contact, the entity could hijack their bodies. Before she could finish, a massive clawed hand shot from the crack and dragged Mora inside. Witnessing this, Funes' heart finally gave out. His body convulsed, and he collapsed. The malevolent entity seized its chance, crawling from the fissure toward the helpless Funes. Meanwhile, Rosentak was still trying to record data with his computer and camcorder. As he set up, the wardrobe behind him creaked open. Fortunately, Funes managed to stumble out of the house. To destroy the evil inside, he grabs 2 cans of gasoline from his trunk and pours fuel in every corner of the house. But each match was instantly blown out by a strange wind. Funes looked toward its source and froze in horror. It was Jano, deliberately blowing out the flames. Thankfully, Funes fires his gun and finally manages to ignite the gasoline, burning the entire house to the ground. In the aftermath, 3 officers summoned Juan, demanding details about the case. Since the fire, the 3 paranormal investigators and Officer Funes had mysteriously vanished. Residents witnessed Funes setting the fire with gasoline, which led to the tragedy. Juan was the last person to see those experts, so the police hoped to obtain some useful clues from him. Juan didn't know what to say. He simply pulled out Rosentak's photo, then pointed behind the investigator, stating Rosentak was right there, his face now charred. In short, the story is about this region being invaded by a creature from another dimension. It could hijack human bodies to control them, and horrifyingly spread its influence through contact with water. Thus, when the soccer-playing boy drank water from Walter's faucet, was hit by a car, and his blood washed into the drain near Juan's house, it infected Clara during her shower. The film is fundamentally an exploration of the unknown. While many elements remain unexplained, this ambiguity perfectly embodies the movie's title. Aterrados signifies supernatural entities, the unknown, and primal fear. Humanity's exploration of science often faces the same profound mysteries.